Lazerboy, what is the nature of your powers?
All right. Da-da-da-da. This is Let me do that over. All right, welcome back to the Lazerboy podcast. You're listening to episode 26, Into the Spider-Man. Really should have thought through that title. Sounds pretty gay there, but hey, it's gender fluid, non-heteronormative society we're living in now, so fuck it. Into the Spider-Man, it is. This is part one. We're going to be talking about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Spider-Man trilogy, I should say. And I'm your host, the Lazerboy. And here with a great Marvel fanboy from way back, super uber Spider-Man nerd, and the voice of our bumper that you hear in each episode. I'm here with Steven. How's it going, Steven?
It's going good, Joseph. How are you doing, Lazerboy? Lazerboy, that is, I should say, with your wondrous powers
When
of laser sight and vision.
when did we get Werner Herzog on the episode? Jesus Christ, this is a...
Well, you never know if it is Werner Herzog or one of his internet stooges.
Exactly. It's a hot guest we got on here.
This is Stephen Best, voice of the proverbial bumper, the laser boy. Here to talk about the amazing Spider-Man. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Well, like I said in the intro, we're going to be talking about Spider-Man 2002, Spider-Man 2 from 2004, and Spider-Man 3 from 2007. All of the Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man, as we call it.
Spider-Man, because
yeah,
that's his name, right?
yeah, like Phil Spider-Man.
Phil Spider-Man. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
So really quickly, we're going to be talking about all three movies with spoilers. So if you haven't seen any of those movies, please watch them and then come back to the episode. And before that, we're going to have a quick little intro where we talk about our thoughts on Spider-Man as a character, cinematically and comic book wise, and our general thoughts on the Spider-Man trilogy overall. So let's get started with that. Steven, without going in it too long, what are your thoughts on Spider-Man? Why do you relate to him, and what's your personal connection with Spider-Man?
Oh, that's a loaded question because I can't go into it without going into it too long. But just to be really short and sweet, I've loved comics ever since I was a kid. I can't even remember when I first started really reading comics, but Spider-Man was always one of my favorites. And I think it's because he is such a relatable character. Um, you know, he's the opposite of Superman and Batman and a lot of the characters in the Justice League and even his fellow Avengers. He's not perfect. He's just this nerdy high school kid from Forest Hills, Queens. And he has a lot of problems, but like the average reader, he's had to go through elementary school and junior high, and now he's going through high school, and it's that part which makes him relatable. If you've ever felt like you were going to school and you didn't fit in, you were kind of a nerd or an outcast, then you can sort of relate to Spider-Man in a sense, because he never really felt comfortable in his own skin until he got the suit. And then once he got the suit, he was the biggest badass in all of New York.
Right. What was the first Spider-Man comic you ever got?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. First Spider-Man comic, I gotta say, I believe, was The Amazing Spider-Man number 2, I want to say, 285.
Mm-hmm.
It had the first appearance of the Silver Sable.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm sorry. I got it right here. I'm looking at it right now. 265.
Silver.
Featuring the first apprentice of Silver Sable.
Okay.
So if we ever do happen to see Silver Sable come up in a Spider-Man movie, cha-ching!
All right. So is that a particular favorite of yours, that comic?
Well, always, because it was the first I ever got.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, did you read Spider-Man a lot? Were you a big Spider-Man fan?
No, well, I don't collect comics as passionately as you do,
Okay.
but I was always a huge fan of Spider-Man, even like animated TV series Spider-Man, and uh, and then obviously when 2002 hit and the major motion picture arrived, I was full
Well, I was going to say
blown
that's a great
Spider-Man.
segue because even the animated stuff I thought was excellent.
But yeah, yeah, 2018 Into the Spider-Verse, yeah, for sure. But no, thank you for sharing your thoughts on Spider-Man and your connection to Spider-Man. I know it's very personal. As for myself, I a self-proclaimed introvert, so seeing a character like Peter Parker, who is himself an introvert, um, again, I relate to him so much. Just the fact that he's this nerdy kid from Queens who gets picked on, and I'm really glad that you pointed out that he only feels like he's in his own skin when he puts on the Spider-Man suit. It's almost like that id of this is the id, right? The uncontrollable urges and the id side coming out and manifesting in Spider-Man, and that's almost like his dormant, like super ego, repressed extrovert, right, coming out. And yeah, like you said, Spider-Man isn't from Metropolis. He's not this rich billionaire from Gotham City. He's not from a made up, fictionalized city. He's from New York City.
Right.
So the fact that that character is just so grounded in reality, and that he's not chosen, right? He's not this chosen one like Kal-El or somebody. He's just bitten at random by a spider, and he just has
Right.
to,
Everything is sort of done by accident.
and then he has to kind of deal with these emotions and kind of grow up, you know, just by circumstance, is really intriguing, and why a lot of people really relate to Spider-Man. He's kind of the everyman superhero, so why I relate to him so much. So thank you for segueing me into that. And really quickly, I forgot to plug the website. I know we haven't done this for a long time, so my structure's all over the place. But really quickly, if you want to look at past episodes and articles, just go to thelazerboy.wordpress.com. Find us on Instagram at thelazerboy with the Z. That's the Lazerboy with a Z. And you can also, most of our podcast episodes are up on the YouTube channel. Just type in the Lazerboy. I think that's the only channel that pops up when you type it in with a Z. So, all right, cool. So that's our thoughts on Spider-Man in general. So let's dive right into the movie, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. What are your and we're talking about the entire trilogy here. So, what are your thoughts generally? Don't get into plot specifics, but just generally, what are your thoughts on the Spider-Man Raimi trilogy, Steven?
Uh, Generally, I think it's a great series of films. Although I have been admittedly obsessed with Sam Raimi since I first saw The Evil Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I can even remember going to see Spider-Man on the original day that it came out in theaters
Yeah.
back in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I was still working at a Hollywood video store. If anyone out there remembers video stores.
I'm sure they do.
I was so jazzed to see this movie come to the big screen. I remember rumors going back as far as like the early 90s after Terminator 2, that James Cameron next big feature was going to be Spider-Man
Mm-hmm.
with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Doctor Octopus,
Wow.
and I think Charlie Sheen was supposed to be Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was kind of this very mythological type of movie in that it spent so long in the making. You didn't really think they'd ever be able to pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, Raimi and his team came along, and they did such an exceptional job. But I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that Raimi, like myself, is just a lifelong fan of the comics
Mm-hmm.
and a great inspired visual storyteller.
Right. So you're a huge fan of the series, to
Yes,
put it lightly, to say the least.
to put it lightly, yes. No,
Uh,
I'd say that it defined, especially the first film, defined very many of the concepts that we now take for granted in superhero movies.
uh-huh.
It was a great origin story that we've kind of seen the formula copied very many times.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good point. The superhero movies before that, I'm looking at. Let's just stick to. Well, actually, like Tim Burton's Batman is the only one on the level of that I can think of, as well as maybe Richard Donner's Superman.
Superman, yeah.
But were those? I can't remember. I know the Tim Burton Batman wasn't really an origin story. I mean, it kind of was. It was kind of both a Batman and a Joker origin story, right? They
Yeah,
kind of created
more
each
so of a
other.
Joker origin story.
Yeah, it was more of a Joker origin, right? What about Superman? Was that a good origin? Was that an origin story at all, or
Yeah, the first two films that Donner did
right?
with Christopher Reeves.
I haven't seen those in a really long time.
Well, and again, the tagline on the poster was "You will believe a man can fly,"
Right, first
and I
for the
always
original.
felt with Spider-Man, you will believe a wall crawler can crawl.
Right. Okay, cool. Um, yeah, for me, I didn't see Spider Man in theaters, but hearing you describe how it was almost like unreal that it finally got to the theaters. I was doing a little research before about the many studios it went through, like you said, from Coralco to whatever, like really shitty studios that aren't around anymore, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
direct to DVD
Ones that
type,
don't even exist
yeah,
except for
direct
on
to DVD
VHS.
type B movie studios, like whoever made The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, right? Those those are
Right.
the kind of studios that were attached to superhero movies because they weren't taken seriously yet, right? I mean, other than Batman and Superman, um, those weren't even taken that seriously. And they had A-list directors attached to them, right? But they didn't
Yeah,
rake.
and some huge casts
Right.
too.
Yeah, exactly. But they didn't rake in the big bucks. And that's the bottom line of studios. And and it was revolutionary, the Spider-Man trilogy, because it did that. It proved people wrong. It said, hey, this is a genre to be that's not only
Dealt with.
bankable, but is entertaining and can hold its own, right? In the pantheon of movie genres. And we have to go back to, I'm looking at really Blade got things going in terms of Marvel movies being taken seriously, right? Blade
Yeah.
by, I forgot who's directed by, but with Steven Dorff and I don't know why I said his name first, but well, Steven Dorff, Wesley Snipes,
Chris
Chris
Christopherson.
Christopherson, yes.
Right.
Who directed that? Do you remember? I'm trying to.
Oh God, it is
I know Guillermo del Toro directed
Guillermo
the
del
second
Toro did
one.
the second one.
It
It
was,
was
I can't remember, but Stephen Norrington. Yeah, he's a
Stephen
very
Norrington,
he's a
who also later did Who?
Oh, okay.
The Extraordinary Gentleman.
Right. Nice. Okay,
And
but I'm
then
looking.
not anything else after that, I believe.
Right, right. So I'm looking back to those films, and then thank you for reminding me in a conversation earlier. But X-Men in 2000, directed by Bryan Singer,
Right.
and then going into Spider-Man in 2002, Daredevil 2002, which was kind of a flop commercially and critically. X2 and Hulk in 2003, Punisher,
Yeah.
with by Ang Lee, the Punisher with that dude from Boogie Nights. I forgot his name. Thomas Jane, right?
Thomas Jane, yes.
Oh,
And
he was
John
a terrible.
Travolta, correct?
He was yes, he was a
Yeah.
terrible Punisher. Spider-Man 2. All of these have one thing in common too. I did not know about. Associate producer for Spider-Man and X-Men was none other than Kevin Feige.
That is true.
He's
Yeah.
a
He's
producer on
been
all
with them
these.
pretty much since the very beginning.
Yeah, he's an exec producer, starting with X2, Spider-Man 2, Hulk, and then I didn't know this because when I was watching the behind the scenes special features of Spider-Man 3, I saw a very young Kevin Feige talking about the movie. I'm like, holy shit! I didn't know he was attached to this, but
Yeah, he's had his fingers in the pie, as it were, for quite some time.
yeah, and that's how he learned to be the mastermind of the MCU as we know it. And this is where he got, this is where he a lot of ups and downs. Of course, he can't be perfect across the board of your filmography, but he had to learn the hard way, right? I'm sure. He learned a lot from Rise of the Silver Surfer and Elektra and The Punisher and Daredevil. Like for every
Yeah.
great success, there has to be a flop, and he learned that. Punisher Warzone, I'm looking at here. I think he was.
Well, it took so long, but what he really did was, I think he had his eye on the prize from the very beginning to get the movies to really coalesce into what is now the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And, in the beginning, he wasn't in charge. There was Avi Arad, and there was Laura Ziskin, and there were a lot of people, again, that had a stock in Marvel. Stan Lee,
Right.
that wanted to sell to different studios, and when they finally did, you had like X-Men going to Fox and Spider-Man going to Sony, and nothing was underneath one house or in one house until really Disney bought out and they did the MCU.
Right. No, that's a great point. I'm looking at all these distributors, 20th Century Fox, Sony, Lionsgate did Punisher. So yeah, it was a mishmash of different studios, different voices, different directors, which of course the MCU has different directors, but it's all under, like you said, under one house, under one voice, under one singular vision,
Correct.
and that is the producer Kevin Feige under Walt Disney Pictures, Marvel Studios, which back then was distributed by Paramount. I'm looking at Iron Man here, and The Incredible Hulk was distributed
Yeah.
by Universal Pictures. It wasn't until like later, maybe 2011 or 12, when Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures got the clout to actually distribute their own pictures. So yeah, it's been a long time coming. I didn't mean to get for this to turn into an MCU thing, but I'm just letting you know about the history of these Marvel films and how really like there wasn't really one unifying voice in these films. Even the trilogy was probably the trilogy I'm talking about. We're talking about in this podcast is Spider-Man. Probably a lot of dissenting voices, a lot of you know like you said, Avi Arad and Lara. What was her name? Lara something.
Ziskin,
Ziskin. Yeah, I'm pretty
I
sure they
believe that's
had.
how it's produced.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had a
No,
lot of
no.
differing opinions on where Spider-Man should go, and in doing that, I think again I agree with you that Spider-Man was a great introduction and a great origin story. Even though I'm kind of tired of origin stories now, but for the time, there wasn't many, so it was good for the time.
Right.
And the fact that people were waiting for Spider-Man for so long to be on the big screen, I'm sure it was just larger than life when it actually hit the theaters, and that's why it's like one of the biggest uh, domestic grosses and opening weekend grosses of all time. Right, it made history. Um,
Well, I think another thing that worked for it is that, again, like I said, with Sam Raimi and that whole team, you did have one unified vision behind the trilogy, but especially what it did very well was it was a benchmark film in that it came out in 2002 in July, I believe.
hmm
But the whole point being is that it was one of the first, not just superhero films, but really major motion pictures to address 9/11
uh,
and the post 9/11 world.
right.
Um, if you go back and you read Stan Lee's comic, there was always the original, Uncle Ben, who had told Spider-Man, "With great power comes great responsibility."
Yeah.
And that line was sort of very well reused in a 21st century sense. Um, in the Raimi films, in that we now live in a world where we don't necessarily know who are our friends or our enemies. I mean, for example, he's very close to Norman Osborn throughout the entire movie.
Who are you talking about right now?
Peter Parker.
Oh, Peter Parker. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's just get into details of the first film. Spider-Man 2002
Yeah,
was directed by Sam Raimi, screenplay by David Kep. He's like the go-to like summer thriller writer. If you want, your script polished for a great summer action thriller, you go to that guy. Um, Starring Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Cliff Robertson, Rosemary Harris. Music by Danny Elfman, such an iconic score.
yeah.
And it grossed $800 million on a budget of 139. So monster, monster gross for the film, and we expected no less, right? Because it says Spider-Man. This is the flagship superhero of Marvel. It's the equivalent of Superman for DC, if I'm not mistaken. Do you agree with that, Steven?
I would say yes. You're absolutely right.
No. So yeah, let's get into details. So you already gave us your thoughts on it's such a great origin story, but let me ask you this: what do you think of the performances? First of all,
Uh, not bad,
uh huh,
not bad. Um, I think Tobey Maguire makes a great Peter Parker.
mm-hmm,
Um, I think, although if you recall, at the time, the only thing he was really known for was Cider House Rules.
oh,
So it was. How do I put this? You can see him as Peter Parker as, again, the proverbial nerd. He's not a jock.
yeah,
He's not the leading man, but he had to, again, sort of become that in plain Spider-Man.
uh huh,
And I think he actually did find a different voice. Um, because again, when Spider-Man puts on that suit, he becomes very witty and sarcastic, and he has all of a sudden this sense of self-confidence
which I don't
that he
think
never
Toby,
had before.
which I don't think Toby Maguire is right for. When he puts that suit on, I could still hear his, gawky, awkward voice, and he doesn't
Yeah,
do a good job of, you know, playing a different character. He's just one note. He doesn't have another note. It's not his fault. Um, like you said, I do agree with you. I think he plays a great Peter Parker. He's very nerdy and awkward, and right before Cider House. Well, I haven't seen Cider House Rules, but I seen him in The Ice Storm. Do you remember that
Yeah,
movie? Directed by Ang Lee,
another
and
Ang Lee film.
yeah, and
Right.
you know what he was doing in that film, right?
Not being the wonk.
Yeah. In addition to that, he was reading comic books. He's reading
Yeah.
Marvel comic books. I remember that precisely because I was like, "Holy shit!" Hey, and then he becomes Spider Man, right? um, but yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
No, it's not a bad bit of casting. I think still talking about Tobey Maguire here, because he's a big enough name to attract people to come see him, but not big as to overshadow everyone else and to say, oh, I don't see. If you got somebody like such a huge name already, they'd be like,
you know who was
it would
number two,
distract.
right?
It would completely distract from this the subtleness, the subtleties of whoever played that character, right?
Right.
And that's why you got all these other up and coming actors like Kirsten Dunst and at the time James Franco, and the only big name in there that we know of is Willem Dafoe. So kudos on the casting. I still think all of the high school students are too old.
Yeah, we
Toby.
talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we talked about
that
this
they were probably
off
our
air.
age when they were supposed to be about 15 or 16. That's a little weird.
Exactly. Yeah, and I know you can't cast 15-year-olds because they can't act and they can't shoot very long without their parents' permission or whatever. But and I'm getting ahead of myself. But Tom Holland looks like a high schooler, you know, uh, and Andrew
That he
Garf
does. Yeah, and even Andrew Garfield.
Andrew
Correct.
Garfield was too old too, and he looked too cool. He looked like a hipster, and he made a great Spider-Man because he's really fast talking and witty, like we talk about what Spider-Man should be when he puts the mask on. But I
But
didn't
he would
buy
have been
him.
at least in junior college.
Sure, sure. I didn't buy him as a nerdy high school student at all. You know what I mean? I'm talking about Andrew Garfield right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of all dude, fucking Joe Manganiello was Flash. That dude looks like he's 35 in this movie. You know what I mean? Like Jesus Christ. I get it though. Whatever. It's 2002. Uh, so do you have anything else to say about the cast? You want to move on real quick?
Um, again, I think it's interesting because you have, uh, like Aunt May and Uncle Ben,
Uh,
Rosemary Harris, and help me out. What was Uncle Ben? What was the actor's name?
Cliff Robertson.
Cliff Robertson. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
on the one hand, it's like if you look at the Spider-Man movies, although this is true to the original comic, they're so old.
In the comics, they're old.
Oh yeah, in the comics,
Oh.
Aunt May and Uncle Ben are octogenarians.
Oh,
They're in their
jeez.
70s, 80s.
Oh man. Okay, so
Um,
that's pretty accurate.
so in that regard, it is. It's extremely accurate to the comics. Then you go and you look at the second trilogy, or the second, I should say, franchise installment, the two
The
Mark Webb films,
the bird.
Amazing
Yeah,
One
the
and
bird.
Two,
Oh, sorry,
and
did I
it's
say
got
Birdman?
Martin Sheen and
No,
Sally Field.
the reboot. Yeah,
Right. And they're a lot
they're a
still much older than Peter Parker, but not like
yeah, they're a bit younger. They're not like fossils.
right. And now you've sort of got going without again skipping too far ahead. Marissa Tomei and John Favreau.
Well, Favreau's not Uncle Ben.
Well, he's not Uncle Ben, but
He's
he's
the uncle,
definitely moving in on that territory.
right? He's the Uncle Ben substitute. Yeah. he is the parental figure, right? Really quickly, I can't believe we forgot to mention J.K. Simmons. Jesus Christ,
Who's a great
genius,
actor.
genius bit of casting. I love him.
Yes.
Was it this movie or was it Spider-Man 2 where he's like, where he's making up headlines and he's like, oh, there's a food poisoning scare, He's
I
like,
think
he's
that's
like,
the
oh, it's the
second
second one.
second one.
Yeah, and the guys, the assistant's like, what? There's no food. There's no food. Is there really a food poisoning scene? He's like, I'm a little
Is
nauseous.
there?
Yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
little nauseous.
I'm a
Yeah,
little nauseous right now.
I love him, man. I just watched Whiplash with my mom because
Your
uh
mom loves heavy metals.
no, Whiplash is about the jazz drummer with J.K. Simmons. He's like a hard ass
Right.
uh orchestra conductor. He's the maestro, but he like throws like a cymbal at his head, and he's just like super a super hard ass. Like that would not
He
pass
plays
today.
he plays a great dick.
Yeah, that would not fly today, especially because all the anti-bullying and harassment. The HR
Right.
team would be all over his ass in real life, but yeah, for the purposes of the dramatic purposes of Whiplash, he's fucking badass. And that movie is badass, by the way. I love that movie. But yeah, I love J.K. Simmons. He makes a great. Wasn't he Commissioner Gordon in the new Batman v Superman? Or he is, right?
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Really quick. Also, James Franco. I hate him as Harry Osborn. Let me ask you this: in the comics, is Harry Osborn supposed to be kind of smart or like a brainy? He's not brainy. He's not as brainy as Peter, obviously. But
Not yeah, not anywhere near. I mean, he has a penchant for science because his dad is Norman Osborn and he
yeah,
wants to live up to his dad's reputation.
but
But
he's
no, I mean, he's not nowhere near as like genius level intellect as Peter or his father is.
he in the comics he's a disappointment as well, right?
Yes.
To Norman Osborn.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, I guess they played that up really well, but man, come on, James Franco. Like, I get it. He's an upcoming name. I don't know, man. He's just too like, dude, where's my car? Like, he's like Ashton Kutcher. He's too like surfer dude. Fucking, I don't know. I don't buy him as Harry Osborn. That's
He wasn't fit for the glider, is what you're saying.
yeah. Bottom line, I just don't like the cut of his jib. I don't like. I don't like.
Chip.
I, dude.
You know what? I disagree with you, Joseph. I think that
Okay,
kid has
please.
moxie.
He has
I think he
moxie.
has
Okay.
real moxie. In fact, I think he's the cat's meow.
Well, thanks for that. Like, I don't even buy him as Peter Parker's friend. Like, do they ever have one moment of sincerity? Like, he's always like kind of just uh I don't know, like subtly bullying him. He's always like taking his girl, or yeah, he protects him from bullies at the whatever that spider convention science thing. But like, dude, those guys don't even have any chemistry. They're supposed to be best friends.
Right.
Whatever. Anything else you want to say about the cast?
Um, I think it was perfectly suitable for what it was at the time. I really liked Willem Dafoe. Now again, I've always loved Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
Um, I think he did a great job as Norman Osborn as Green Goblin. I think like I said, a lot of the difficulty was that you have these very uh, professional actors who were almost like Shakespearean trained or theater trained, who had to do a movie that was highly physical with a lot of stunts. And I mean, okay, let's face it. Like, if you look at the Green Goblin now, going back to the original 2002 film, versus what he looked like in the comics,
Mm-hmm.
in the comics, he looked scary.
Mm.
He looked frightening. He looked like a dude that you did not want to see coming after you under any given circumstances. He had this devilish grin with teeth that were just yellow and rotten and crooked like the slats of a fence in a graveyard. He
Mm-hmm.
had these beady eyes, this long hood. He looked like something out of a grim fairy tale. And he would come after Spider-Man with his pumpkin bombs, and try to blow the shit out of him.
Okay.
And it was just amazing. And then you go to the movie, and he's kind of wearing this sort of pseudo Iron Man suit that's all green.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which is a great segue for the next topic I want to talk about the film, which is the tone. And Green Goblin in particular, every time we see, Norman Osborn struggling with this dual identity, it's almost like a horror film, right? One of the greatest jump scares that still gets me when I watched it recently was when, Norman, played by Willem Dafoe, was like blacked out in his office and he's
Yeah.
trying to recall what happened, and we kind of get like a really quick flashback of like the Green Goblin. It's like, "Ah!" And then you like see it like a quick jump to that, and it always gets me because you're fixated on his face and what's going on, and then all of a sudden this jump cut to something horrifying, which is his alter ego. Um, yeah, which is a great Raimi has his roots in horror, right? Evil Dead you mentioned before, one of your favorite films, and you could tell there's a lot of horror elements in this trilogy, especially in the villains, right? With Doc Ock, um,
Oh, yeah,
Green
very much
Goblin,
so.
obviously Green Goblin, and then jumping ahead with Sandman and Venom. So you could tell like he needed to have his horror sensibilities in the villains, and I think it's a great touch. What do you think about that? The tone and
No,
of
I
the
would say,
film,
yeah,
yeah.
the tone exactly for the movies was spot on. I mean, one of the things that I recall in going back and rewatching the films was how brutal the very last fight scene was
Oh
between
sure, yeah,
Spider-Man and Green Goblin.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I mean, they're really going at it and tearing each other apart.
sure, sure.
Um, and I always liked that in the comics too, when the character was at his most vulnerable, or when it really seemed like, wow, this, Peter could be in danger. This could not necessarily work out in his favor.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
but I mean, so tonally, it was there. It had that sense of humor. It had this sense of adventure. I think in particular.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it really shows in the color palette of the film as well as the cinematography. Um, it's very kind of very what am I calling like what am I saying like very stylized, right? It's very like almost
Yes.
German expressionism where you see all these canted angles and these high towers and bright colors isn't German expressionism, but it's very almost like Dick Tracy, where it's like other
Oh yeah, absolutely.
like
I was just gonna say very very bright colors.
yeah, very otherworldly where it doesn't exist in the real world as opposed to again I'm jumping kind of ahead, but you look at the Mark Webb Spider-Man which I recently watched and it's much more darker and muted and especially the first Amazing Spider-Man Spider-Man is swathed in shadows. It's almost like the Dark Knight version of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So compare those two films, it's like night and day, like literally, because most of the Raimi uh, Spider-Man, the original one mostly is very bright and colorful. So it has
Well,
that
I
going
think
for
that
it.
goes back to I think that goes back to them trying to replicate the original Steve Ditko look of the comics from the
Okay,
'60s.
yeah, yeah. Please talk about that.
Well, I mean, back I think it was 62, 63 when Spider-Man first premiered in Amazing Fantasy number 15.
Uh huh.
So again, in comic books in print, um, he was always very, red and blue. I love in the comics when they I know they've done this in every movie now or every installment of the franchise, but when they show him designing the costume and getting all inspired and even in like the Mark Webb one where he's like the lucha libre type of.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a very colorful film. Let's talk about really quick before we wrap up the first part of Spider-Man or the first film. What are the themes of Spider-Man, the film, off the top of your head, if you can think of?
Well,
Obviously, no. Go ahead.
with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The It's uttered out loud by Uncle Ben, right?
Right. I mean, in that film, he has to genuinely sacrifice a lot of himself.
So you're talking about Peter Parker slash Spider-Man.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So how does he learn that in the film?
Well, he learns that, I think, through Uncle Ben's death
Uh huh.
and the tragedy and the possibility that he may have caused it
Yeah.
or been responsible for it,
Right.
and that he has to protect the people closest to him because if anyone figures out, who Peter Parker is, then they're going to go after Aunt May. They're going to go after Mary Jane. They might even go after Flash Thompson for Pete's sake.
Right. Yeah. And
Literally, just
then
piss off Pete. Where they're going to go, we got Flash Thompson.
right.
No,
Then who's gonna bully Peter Parker?
exactly.
You're gonna miss him. You're gonna miss him when he's gone. Um, yeah, great points. I also think they did a great job of juxtaposing that conflict within Peter Parker slash Spider Man. You know, that dual identity thing that he struggles with. Um, Juxtaposing that with what Norman Osborn is going through, because he also has this split personality, right? But this is against his will because he took
Right.
that whatever that super serum or whatever it's
Super
called,
soldier serum.
super
Right.
soldier serum. Okay, yeah. So
Or
they
a
did a great
variant
job of that,
thereof.
and also in that scene where they just had a fight. They just had a fight, and then they go to have Thanksgiving dinner, and Norman Osborn is just super paranoid. He's like, "Where's Peter?" And then he sees that cut on his arm, and he's like, he
Right.
just leaves. So that's a great way of showing those two, our hero and our villain in conflict with each other and with themselves. So I think that's another theme that I have to struggle with dual identities. Which one can't? Which how
Yes.
can I balance that?
Well, in
And
that scene specifically, they realize whom each other is, but
right,
they can't confront each other directly over, like you said, Thanksgiving dinner. It would be kind of awkward.
right, and of course, Spider-Man slash Peter is also dealing with his, his blooming um, emotions, his feelings for Mary Jane Watson, which he can't not manifest because in this film, Mary Jane is dating Harry, and then kind of is dealing with her own conflict where she kissed Spider-Man. Spider-Man saves her all this time, and she has a huge crush on him, and then she ends up leaving Harry, right?
Hmm.
Because of her deep emotion for Spider-Man, and she doesn't find out about Peter in this film, right? If I'm correct.
In the first movie, not officially, but I think she probably suspects.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. And then that's it. That's about it. Yeah, you're talking about that brutal fight scene. Um, yeah. Another really quick thing I forgot to mention. When Green Goblin comes and takes Aunt May or like makes her go crazy. I
Right.
love that scene where she's just like she's praying and he's like, "Deliver us!" And he's like, "Finish it!" He's like, he's so villain. He's like, "Finish it from evil." So hammy. Oh my god. But it's still pretty funny. And then like she's like all crazy in the hospital, right? She's like, it's just his crazy green face and those yellow eyes.
Goblin was a he was a badass. He
Yeah,
was a he did not mess around.
aren't those the qualities? The beady yellow eyes. Aren't those the quality of like a demonic figure?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's literally a goblin on a glider that throws bombs that are shaped like pumpkins.
Right. 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 Yeah. He's quite the. Uh, demonic figure, that's for sure. It's not so scary, but it's PG-13, and they have to. It's a 4 quadrant film, so they can't make him too scary. So, I
Right.
get the in terms of marketing and whatever. But okay, cool. So that's any other final thoughts on Spider-Man before we move on?
I liked it. Two thumbs up.
Yeah, I think it was good, but obviously before we get into Spider-Man 2, it didn't reach its full potential because it spent too much time setting things up, and it wasn't comfortable in its own skin, so to speak. See what I did there?
Oh yeah, I got you. I got you.
All right, cool. So let's move on to Spider-Man 2 in 2004. Also directed by Sam Raimi, written by a bunch of other people, not a sole screenwriter. But I don't have it up right here, but I know that Michael Chabon did a rewrite, uncredited, or was it credited? I'm not sure. But he's the Eisner winning, like Nebula award winning writer. So you could tell this. Okay, I'm right here. Screenplay by Alvin Sargent, Alfred Goh, Miles Millar, and Michael Chabon. There you go.
Yeah.
So you could tell with his credit that this film is aiming at a much more high level prestige, right? And I think it does that very well. Okay, so what are your general thoughts of Spider-Man 2?
I'd say Spider-Man 2 is probably the best in the trilogy.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Just,
That's
it,
oh,
that's it. Hands down.
period.
Period. Into
Mic
sentence.
mic drop.
There you have it.
Well, I agree with you, and that's it. Let's move on. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
What do you
Uh,
think makes it a masterpiece?
it again, like you said, it doesn't waste any time in telling, other than the origin of Doctor Octopus, which it does very succinctly. It just jumps into it, and it jumps. The movie just. I don't know. I mean, it's not that far away in tone or in pacing, but you can tell it's sort of when like Raimi and everyone really got their groove on.
Mm-hmm.
It just moves in a way that like Spider-Man is supposed to move on screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, all the characters are sort of there and on point. It's got a story that you really do. Again, you feel, oh my god, he's starting to lose his powers. He can't web sling anymore. He can't crawl on walls. This could be the end of Spider-Man. Could it?
Mm-hmm.
He throws away his own costume.
Right.
So
I.
it's got a very dramatic edge to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta tell you, can't agree with you more. Couple of things before I mention my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. I failed to mention the romance of Spider-Man, the original film, which I felt a little hammy and um, very daytime drama ish. Like I
We'll
didn't
live our
believe,
lives.
yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't believe it, and it felt like it was written. There was no chemistry between them, nothing that grew organically. It was like, okay, yes, Peter Parker was in love with her for since he was in the third grade, so we know that they're gonna get together. Whereas in this film, whereas in Spider-Man 2, that romance is fully fleshed. Um, you know, of course, it does build on what happened in Spider-Man, where he rejected Mary Jane's love, right, for unselfish reasons, right? He wanted to protect her, and it's further developed in this film as almost kind of like a Wong Kar Wai esque, like I need to suppress this longing for the woman I love because for the same reasons, but at the same time it affects the character in a much more dramatic sense, right? He's having an identity crisis. He can't his powers are no longer functioning because he
Yeah,
suppressed
exactly,
this
exactly. It's an
great
existential
emotion,
type of thing.
this very complicated emotion, as Dr. Otto Octavius tells him. You can't suppress something as complicated as love, or something disastrous is going to happen, and that's exactly what happens. And I love that kind of that metaphor of he's struggling internally with this, and then it affects Spider-Man as well. So just that dramatic, that piece of drama in and of itself is very adult and feels real, feels organic, and feels fully fleshed out. And you know, and it's externalized with his struggle with Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, which is probably one of the greatest villains in superhero history, dare I say, because he's also a very fully formed, fleshed out villain as well. We
Oh yeah.
we sympathize, nay, empathize with his plight, right? He just wants to do the right thing for the good of man, and then he something goes wrong, and he needs to pay for those mistakes, right? Um, so yeah, man, yeah, I love this film. When it came out, I was just like in awe over it. I was gobsmacked, and great pacing. All the set pieces are incredible. That train sequence, oh my
The train
god,
yes.
wow! And even like the bank heist sequence where, she carries Aunt May up the
At the
tower.
tower,
Yeah, wow! It's just
throwing the
they know what they're
giant
doing.
money
It's like
bags at Spider-Man.
right, and even a little cameo by Joel, forget his name, the dude from Community, Joel McHale, the guy that's he wouldn't give him a toaster because it's a $300 minimum, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Great cameo by him. I loved him.
I love it. We can't not talk about the Bruce Campbell cameos as well.
Right. Yeah, what was the first one? It was
The
the
wrestling
wrestling.
match.
Yeah, the wrestling match, and then the
It was
second
the
one.
commentator or
Right.
the
Oh,
host.
right. Was he the one that gave him the name Spider Man too?
Right. He's like, I'm
Is
the
it?
human spider. Like
I'm
that's
the. Hey,
ridiculous.
that's not my name. I'm the
It's
human
the Amazing
spider.
Spider-Man
He's like, I don't care what your name is. And then
versus Macho Man Randy Savage.
Randy Macho Man Savage, so awesome. Oh yeah, snap into a Slim Jim. What was Bruce Campbell's cameo in part two?
He wouldn't let him into the theater.
Oh,
He
right.
wanted to see Mary Jane in the play.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir. Everyone has been seated.
Yes. He's like telling him to do like adjust your tie and then do all.
Right.
He's like, oh, sorry, ticket, please.
Ticket.
Yeah, and then the third one, he's the French guy, right?
At the restaurant.
Yeah. Oh, you want to pop the question?
Eh? Oh, very romantic. I should know I am French.
I am French. Yeah, man. Oh, really quickly, what are the Stan Lee cameos? Rest in peace, Stan Lee. But the first one, he was just a guy got the woman out of the way, right?
In the first one, he's like you see him for like a second.
Yeah, he just gets a woman out of the way from the building, or from the bottom.
Attacks during like the World Day Parade.
Yeah.
And then in the second one, kind of the same thing. He pushes a kid out of the way.
Right, and then in part three, it's the enough said.
He finally walks up to Peter Parker when they're like, he said Gwen Stacy, he's going to get the key to the city. And Stanley's like, I guess one person can make a difference.
Enough said. Yeah, one of the greatest. I think that was his greatest cameo in the worst Spider-Man movie, but we'll get there soon enough. All right, really quickly, what else do you like about Spider-Man 2? I know we're just kind of breezing through this, but yeah, great casting. Alfred Molina as Dr. Otto Octavius. When he gives him just like a struggling, he wants to make renewable energy, right, for the world,
right,
and he needs to do it by taking blood money, so to speak, from Oscorp. Happy to pay the bills, Otto, right? As Harry Osborn says. And he just wants a Nobel Peace Prize, right? And of course, I love that conflict. There's always conflict with the artist and the financier, right?
Correct.
Uh, and yeah, he goes terribly wrong, and he couldn't. What was he trying to do again? He was what was that thing he was
Well,
doing?
he needed to harness, like you said, that energy, but also in order to do that, he needed the tentacles, and the
Yeah,
tentacles were controlled by an artificial intelligence, which took over because remember it was attached to his spine with that neural inhibitor chip that malfunctioned.
yeah.
Come on, man, this is not first. God, you embarrass yourself.
Who, me?
Yes,
Why?
you should have known that.
I should have known that.
Yes,
Um,
sorry.
fusion reaction is yeah, the fusion. We have achieved fusion reaction or whatever that's called, fusion power project. He just wants renewable, clean, sustainable energy. It's something that geniuses today, tech billionaires are still trying to achieve. Anyway, so yeah. He gets that neural inhibitor fried, and he becomes one with the robot tentacle arms, and he becomes a monster. Ah, but he still wants to build this reactor because he wants to finish what he started, right?
Right.
And so I guess one of the main themes of this film is he says to Peter, you're brilliant but lazy, right? And I love what he says to him in that conversation.
Correct. Yeah.
I love what he says to him in that conversation. He says, you know, you have a moral responsibility. It's what does he say? It's not a privilege, right? You need to use it for the good of mankind. And I guess that's one of the
Yes, is a genius.
right, yeah, that's one of the almost carrying on that with great power comes great responsibility. In this case, it's with great brilliance comes great responsibility, and
True.
as well as dealing with his dual identity and his repressed romantic emotions with Mary Jane, right? But yeah, I think we covered all the main points. The great subway train sequence. Throughout the entire film, Harry is down in the outs because of the failed project. The fusion power project was failed, so he's kind
Right.
of wallowing the whole time and still trying to exact revenge on Spider-Man, who in the previous film he saw brought his father back to his home, his dead body, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
he's that's another running theme of the trilogy is Harry's disdain for Spider-Man, who he doesn't know is his best friend. And then of course you got the romance. Mary Jane is um, involved with J. Jonah Jameson's son, the astronaut, something Jameson. That actor looks really familiar. I believe it was this guy who was in like the Vampire Diaries, I think. Dylan Baker as Kirk Connors. That was a pretty good bit of casting. He's not in it that much, but
No, he's not. It was interesting though what they might have been setting up.
right, yeah, because there's so many villains, like who's who of Spider-Man villains, right, in the archive that they had there, and which we
He
can
does have
tell.
quite the rogues gallery. Yes.
Exact. Thank you so much. I was looking for that term, but yeah, the Rogues Gallery, which you can tell that really got to them in part three when they couldn't even decide who's the main villain in that, so they just opted for three. But go
Correct.
go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about part two? I think we're
I think part two works so well probably because they gave Sam Raimi carte blanche. They probably just said let this guy make the movie he wants to make.
yeah.
Where I think is, and this is my segue into part three. Part three felt a lot more like a studio made by committee, or a film made by committee by a studio.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. And usually part twos of trilogies are because of, you're right, because they, you know, the director had such great success with the first film, which was probably very much micromanaged by the studio and a lot of producers and shareholders and what have you. And then part two is when they say, do your thing. You made us a lot of money, so just
Right.
give us more of the same. Work your magic, and that's what he did. And he got a bigger budget, and he has a good rapport with the actors, with his crew. Everybody knows what to do now, so they didn't have to set anything up. They had not no more origin story. We set up we did all the world building. We're free to just run with it now, and that's what you can tell that they did, and it's completely masterful. I love it so much to this day, right?
Yeah.
All right, sounds like we both love Spider-Man 2. Let's get into, our less enthusiastic review of Spider-Man 3. So, yeah, let's start with you, Steven. What do you think of Spider-Man 3?
It didn't need Venom.
Say that again.
It didn't need Venom. It did not need Venom.
It did not. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was just kind of plugged in at the end, right?
Yeah. I think what would have been interesting was I heard initially he wanted to have Hayden Christensen as Sandman
Ah.
and Ben Kingsley as the Vulture.
Oh. Yeah, that would have been fascinating.
I think that would have been an interesting combo. Yes.
But yeah, you hit it right on the head. Too many villains. I can see what they were trying to do with the themes of building on the themes of these first two films. Uh, you know, Kevin Feige said, I watched a little bit of the special features, and he said this Spider-Man 3 themes are of growth, redemption, and forgiveness. And I could see that. I could see how
Yeah.
he made a lot of mistakes, Spider-Man, as well as some other characters, and he needs to find some kind of redemption. The Marco Flint character is looking for redemption, right?
Correct.
Um, the Venom character is just maniacal. He's just the straight up id, right? I think Topher Grace said he had a great quote in the special features. He said, "With great power comes great fun."
Yeah.
I love that line. The complete opposite of the other line, right? The other.
Right.
But yeah, this movie's kind of a mess. I think a lot of people agree with me, so I'm not in the minority here. But let's just try to focus on what's good, shall we? Another thing I failed
Okay.
to mention about Spider-Man 2, which I think really elevated it, was the cinematography by Bill Pope, who is best known for his work on The Matrix. But
Mhm.
I did not know that he worked with Raimi first on Evil Dead. So, it's sort of like a homecoming for him and Sam
Correct.
Raimi here with Spider-Man 2. And he also worked on Spider-Man 3, which both, I think, elevate it into kind of prestige level in terms of looks, because Bill Pope definitely has a very distinguished, like almost cold, detached, accurate, accurate to storyboards level cinematography, and you could tell with him and his work on The Matrix, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Um,
mean, with the action scenes and how they lay out every single individual shot has to tell a different story.
uh-huh. But Spider-Man 3, as I said, I told you guys what I didn't really like about Spider-Man 1. Spider-Man 3 really just kind of elevates those things that I hated from Spider-Man 1. One being that the romance is feels just super cheesy. The the love triangle just feels super soap opera dramatic, almost like the writers don't have never been in a real relationship, and they're like, "Oh, this is what couples do," because we saw it in a movie. So that's what it feels like. You know,
Yeah, the whole Peter Parker goes evil by doing a dance routine in a jazz club is sort of it doesn't make a lot of sense.
why? Like, why? Why did you subject me to that? It's just another like 15, 20 minutes of screen time that could have been devoted to something else, to actually developing character. But, it's obvious the movie's not interested in that. It just wants to cram in as much as possible in 2 hours and 20 minutes. So let me ask you, what did you like about Spider-Man 3?
Costume design was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, the black suit Spider-Man.
Black suit, yeah, that was um, it tried.
Uh-huh.
I'll give it an A for effort,
Yeah,
B plus maybe,
right.
minus, B minus.
Okay.
It tried.
What do you think of? I really like the opening action sequence with the new Goblin. Is that what he's called?
Oh yeah,
The
Hobgoblin.
Hobgoblin. I think they get a little too carried away with like aerial fights, which look really dumb because there's no gravity, there's no weight to any of the characters. You could tell it's fucking two CG characters fighting in the air, and they're not even falling properly. You know, like he does
Right.
that a lot with obviously the Hobgoblin, and then later with Sandman, like they're like falling and they're like punching each other. It's like really, like is that you think that you're topping yourself with that? No, it looks terrible. The Sandman design is kind of cool. Like the T1000, kind of he like gathers himself with the sand grain, right?
Right.
And I think he's probably the most fleshed out villain, right? Obviously, Eddie Brock is a shit show. Like, first of all, terrible casting. Topher Grace, no, I don't believe him.
Yeah.
We just know him too well as Eric Foreman from that '70s show, so
True. True. Yeah.
he's
No,
just
he
a
didn't. He
joke.
wasn't. Tom Hardy has done a much better job, I think.
Okay, yeah, nice.
He's not Venom. Venom. Eddie Brock was supposed to be foreboding. Topher Grace is not really foreboding.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think the Venom was kind of plugged in. There it's just fan service really. They're like, we really want to see Venom. Venom is probably like the flagship villain of Spider-Man of the Spider-Man series. So they just wanted to, it's going to be the last movie, so they just plugged him in, and to the detriment of the movie, unfortunately. But yeah, Sandman was perfect for the movie, and even Goblin had a lot more screen time, right? Because they developed him
Yeah. Yeah.
as his vendetta against Spider-Man, and but the
And like you
whole
said, they brought back the themes of his redemption and Spider-Man's forgiveness.
sure, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't like how it played out like during the movie, but I liked how I see what they're trying to do, but it just I'm not sure it really worked how they
Well,
executed.
I think also you kind of nailed it in that you mentioned they were trying to wrap everything up into a neat and tidy little package.
Yeah,
Because again, I think at the time, studios thought the most that we can get out of a single franchise,
is yeah
3 movies. We
three
can do a
movies. Yeah,
trilogy and
do a
that's it.
trilogy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Unless we're George Lucas, then we can do some prequels. But other than that,
Right.
we
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
get more
yeah,
than three.
yeah, yeah.
And that's what the MCU has really proven. Well, actually, you can put Robert Downey Jr. in like 10 collective movies
Right.
across the board.
Yeah. Really quick, going back to the stupid notion that Harry Osborn like loses his memory again. That's like a telenovela. Amnesia. Really,
Oh, yeah, that was rather convenient,
is that the
wasn't it?
best you can think of, writers? Come on.
Yeah.
And then all those musical numbers. Did he really have to dance the twist with Mary Jane in the kitchen there? And I do like the idea of emo Spider Man because it's his raging id inside that he gets to unleash, and that's the black suit Spider Man. It's the ooze, right? What is that called?
The symbiote.
The symbiote. Yeah, the symbiote attaches itself to evil things, right? It was when he feels like when he has like negative emotions that's when it attaches itself to him when he was like trying to find the Flip Marco character, um, and then him like finally telling off Harry, and then uh, being like a philanderer, and like telling that poor girl next door to get him milk and cookies.
Yes,
all,
yes.
all that stuff I love. I had a lot of fun with, but
Okay, you got milk? You have nuts? Make
exactly,
it. Go make it
exactly.
with nuts.
Or when he's fighting Harry and he's like, "Oh, is the little Goblin Junior gonna cry now?" Shit like that. It felt good because, as I said, I'm an introvert, so whenever I feel like I get to, engage with my id, it feels really fucking good. You know what I mean? So that's just a little bit of wish fulfillment for me, I guess. But uh, again, did they execute it that well? Not really. But I see what they're going for. Like you said, A for effort, right?
Right.
Any particular action sequence you liked the most?
I did like the one where he did first don the black costume and went after Marco and the subway
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and was trying to tear him up, but he just kept turning into mud and sand.
yeah. Oh, right, right. Yeah, and then he like washes him down that.
Right after tunnel.
Yeah, you could tell he was like going for the throat, right? Because he was in Black Suit Spider Man, so
Yeah.
he's much more violent, and he's like not just trying to disable you. He's just going for the throat, going for the jugular, and that was really cool that they explored that theme. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention about Spider Man 2 that scene where they're in the cafe,
Oh yeah,
and
when
then
the car goes
yeah,
through
the
the window.
cargo, you see him. Oh man, that's so good. Oh, I love that shit so much. But yeah, yeah, and I also loved when he like broke Eddie Brock's camera. That was when he was in like full black suit Spider Man at that
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Jerk off. Hey, can I get a post, Spidey?
right.
Jerk.
I think he says, "What the hell?"
Oh.
Oh, the humor is kind of really broad and over the top, but I do love, the sequence where J. Jonah Jameson is like
Dressed up
get
as
no, when he's getting angry in the office, and Betty Brant is always like
Tinker
buzzing his
Films.
table. Yeah, he's like, ah, like not that one, ah, not that one. I shouldn't be laughing, but it's just so over the top. Pretty funny. That's their idea of humor. It's not very subtle, but yeah, they've done a lot better job in the MCU of toning down their humor. It's not super fucking slapsticky, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the final sequence, yeah, it's kind of super rushed, right? Venom wants his, I guess Eddie Brock wants his revenge on Spider-Man because he humiliated him, right, in front of everybody. He doctored, like he had a photoshopped photo of Spider-Man.
Right, for the Daily Bugle.
Yeah, yeah, and he teams up with Marco to have a final showdown, and then at that point, Harry, Harry's disfigured from his fight with Black Spider-Man, Dark Spider-Man, whatever we want to call it. And he comes in. You gotta help me out, buddy. Even though I fucking disfigured you, almost killed you, you gotta come help me. So, so improbable. So, whatever. But that's what happens. Yeah, in all these movies, he never had like an ally, huh?
Not really, no.
Yeah. So I kind of like that team up, Hobgoblin and Spider Man.
Right,
He at that point, I think he got the ooze, the symbiote off of him,
right.
and it dripped on Eddie Brock. And so they have a final fight on some kind of abandoned building, right?
Yeah, like a skyscraper under construction.
Yeah. We forgot to mention, throughout this whole thing, one of the things that Mary Jane is going through is she lost her job in Broadway, and she's kind of jealous of Super Spider-Man spotlight. He's just so
Right.
full of himself, right? And she's just like, she can't take it. And Spider-Man, Peter Parker, doesn't even. He's just so up his own ass at this point that
Yeah.
he can't even see anything. And we forgot to mention that, yeah, he was about to marry her. Aunt May gave him engagement ring, right?
Right.
And we didn't really get to see Aunt May that much in this film, huh? A couple of times where he just, well, she gave him the ring, and then later she's like, "You never come talk to me anymore."
Right. Yeah, wasn't that present?
Yeah. And you'd think that, like, the finale of the trilogy got to wrap up arcs for all these major characters, but
Right.
Aunt May got the short shrift of it. J. Jonah Jameson, what happens to him at the end? I know he like buys a camera from a girl, like a
A
Polaroid or
girl,
something,
right? Yeah.
and then
But
like
there's no
she's like,
film in the camera.
yeah, she's like, that's $100 or something,
Right.
and then that's the final time we see him. So yeah, not a good job of wrapping up, even tertiary characters. I know that, like, dude, fucking Gwen Stacy's in this, right? Why?
Right.
Just because she's a character in the comic. Captain Stacy's in it. He has like 3 lines.
Yeah, something like that.
Why?
Because they could.
Right. It's like the Jeff Goldblum line, right? And
Right.
they thought they're too occupied to think of whether they could. They didn't think of whether or not they should. Anyway, so that's yeah, that wraps us up with Spider-Man 3. It was a terrible film. Okay, but the way Harry dies, kind of cool. He sacrifices himself, right?
Yeah.
It just comes out of nowhere. Yeah, the way that they, like, Harry Osborn's version of Alfred, right? The butler is like,
Yeah, Bernard. Yes.
is that his name, Bernard?
Bernard, I believe so.
He's like, I saw the blade. So he there's no question it was his own doing. Like, you couldn't tell him that before, buddy. Like,
Right.
it's so convenient that he tells him that, you know.
You've left that out for the last 5 years.
Right, he tells him at, the magic hour where he has to come and fight beside Spider-Man. I thought the concept of giant Sandman was kind of cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do you kill a guy made of sand and that can fly?
I don't know.
Fly in the wind.
Because in the end, he just kind of flies away.
He flies away.
I forgive you too.
He says, "I'm sorry. Was it your uncle
I
was
didn't
just
mean to kill your uncle." Like, okay,
Yeah.
get out of here then.
right?" They completely retcon that too to make him the real killer of Uncle Ben.
Right.
Just hammy writing. It's like almost like they submitted a first draft and said, "Let's shoot this fucking thing," right?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what we got. Can't complain about it too much. I remember seeing it in the theaters and was pretty disappointed, but pretty engrossed by the action sequences. So at least there's that. And then
Yeah, that is true. The action sequences were pretty decent.
yeah, like the one where like Sandman is in like a truck,
Right.
like a truck full of sand was kind of cool, right? I think it's like one of the first times that he fights Spider-Man. He's like robbing a bank or something, or
Yeah.
a security truck, something like that. Yeah, everything wraps up. Harry dies. He sacrifices himself. That solidifies the theme of redemption, right? Sacrifices himself for his best friend. Peter, I think one of the final shots, he goes back to the jazz club, right?
Yes.
And then they
So
dance.
Jane's still working there as a waitress.
Yeah. So that's a weird arc for her, huh? She just is a failure, but she didn't really have any autonomy. She just all of her character is just about Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's just they didn't know what to do with her, so it's just let's give her something to do, but it's not that important. Anyway, no, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you.
Yeah. All right, so it sounds like we both hated Spider-Man 3. Just shows you, it's just a cautionary tale, right? It's just
Right.
whatever, it's Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
Absolutely.
That's what that's the subtitle of Spider-Man 3. It should have been called Murphy's fucking Law. Spider-Man 3's Murphy's Law. But you know, it is what it is. You can't change the past. We have a new Spider-Man, two new Spider-Men, three if you want to count the Into the Spider-Verse. Miles Morales, pretty good one too. So can't complain too much, right? Right, Steven?
Right.
But it sounds like we're both getting a little tired here. Let's wrap it up. So next time we're going to be talking about Mark Webb's reboot of The Amazing Spider-Man. How can you go wrong with that? A guy named Mark Webb directs a Spider-Man film, right, Steven?
Exactly.
Am I right or am I wrong?
You're right. You're not wrong.
Right? Thank you for that. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. All right, this is all going to be building up to our we're going to review The Amazing Spider-Man next, the two Amazing Spider-Men, and then maybe we'll talk about, the Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man before we do a podcast on Spider-Man No Way Home. Really excited for that, my friend. Because as we know from the trailer, they're going to incorporate, at least from the Raimi, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin and Electro.
Alfred Molina, yeah.
Yeah, Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. And Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I even saw a little brief glimpse of Lizard in the trailer. So, sorry, spoilers for the trailer. You saw that too, right?
Yeah.
Played by, I forgot his name. It's like an Australian.
Reese Witherspoon?
Yeah. Something like that. Sounds like that. Sounds about right. So, yeah, it behooves us not to watch all of the Spider-Man movies of days past to prepare for the events of No Way Home. So with that, I want to thank my guest again, Steven. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your insights. I know you're a lifelong Marvel and Spider-Man fan, so your insights were invaluable, my friend.
All
right, so you guys could watch more episodes of our podcast on thelazerboy.wordpress.com and find us on YouTube at The Lazerboy. Can you close us out with the Lazerboy bumper there, Steven?
Lazerboy, what is the nature of your powers?
Incredible. Amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
A Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins away